These are very specific types of fighter jets, or of jets, of U.S. military jets, Air Force jets, not fighter jets per se. Their deployment is indicative of what one would see in the lead up to kinetic operations centered heavily on strikes, on targets in inland areas, such as ones the United States might carry out in Venezuela in the future. These are Growler jets. They could provide electronic warfare support for platforms launching standoff attacks or penetrating through enemy air defenses to get closer to their objectives. The jets could also help ensure the survivability of standoff munitions themselves. So these are electronic warfare jamming systems that they will utilize for land-based attacks. And to top it off, we also have this. Reuters published photos showing HC-130J Combat King II combat search and rescue helicopter planes and helicopters on the ramp at Roosevelt Roads at the former U.S. Navy facility in Puerto Rico. Last week, I had Professor Zhang Shuquin on my show Legitimate Targets. Go watch the episode if you haven't seen it. And he explained why he believes that there will not be an all-out war, an invasion, so to speak, of Venezuela. Now, I happen to believe that as of right now, the U.S. is in no place whatsoever to actually launch an invasion of Venezuela. I think it would make Vietnam look like a cakewalk. The U.S. has 18,000 troops in the Caribbean, and let me just tell you, that is nowhere near enough. The Venezuelan standing army right now, probably like 500,000. The Bolivarian People's Militia has like 2 million. The Venezuelan government, by the way, is just like passing out rifles to the people in working class neighborhoods left and right because they want people to be able to defend themselves if this does happen. Just like the Venezuelan military is just taking rifles to these Maduro strongholds, working class communes, and handing out rifles to everyone. So yeah, I really don't believe that a U.S. military invasion is going to do much of anything besides get a lot of Americans killed as they try to install a pro-Israel Zionist leader who wants to make gay marriage legal in Venezuela and sell off all of Venezuela's mineral resources and oil to American majority-owned transnational corporations. But I do want to discuss this because Professor Zhang Zhuquin, when he was on my show, he said basically this. I do not believe that the Trump administration is serious about regime change in Venezuela, and his true purpose is to disrupt the drug trade. Well, we already know that drugs don't come from Venezuela. The U.S. intelligence agencies, the DEA, has literally admitted that, which everyone assumes is a pretext. I am convinced that Trump is intent on a third term, and so he must undermine the deep state, which he believes stole the 2020 election. The CIA controls the drug trade, and by disrupting the flow of drugs into America, will cut off the black money that powers the deep state. Well, if that's the case, he's not doing a good job because drugs don't come from Venezuela. Oil does. Now, the truth of what's going on is Venezuela has 17% of the world's oil reserves. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the partner members of BRICS, they control 50% of the world's oil supply, oil trade. That's a lot. And most of that is done in non-dollar denomination. So this oil trade that is led by BRICS nations is done in rupee to ruble currency settlements, or rupee to, I guess, to the Europeans. They're not BRICS, but you get the idea. It's done in petro yuan settlements. It's done in ruble settlements. It's done in rupee settlements. Venezuela, if Venezuela were to join BRICS, which it's not a member of because the U.S. blocked them from joining by using their puppet power in Venezuela in Brazil through the Brazilian Foreign Ministry. But Venezuela basically is a BRICS member. I mean, they are in effect part of the BRICS grouping, even though they're not an official member. They control 17%. So what does that mean? BRICS now controls, in effect, 67% of the world's global oil reserves. Now, all of Venezuela's oil is primarily going out in petro yuan settlements. I think it's about 85% of Venezuela's oil is being sold and being traded in petro-yuan settlements. Now, Venezuela does not do a lot of oil exports, not a lot of oil refining, because they simply just do not have the infrastructure to do it, thanks to U.S. economic warfare that has been waged upon the country for years and years and years. But it is worth noting that if Venezuela were to obtain or were to have partners that could bring the proper processing or refining technologies to the Caribbean and then go on and export the oil across the world, the vast majority of that oil, and it is a lot, largest oil reserves in the world, would be sold in petro-yuan settlements. Donald Trump on numerous occasions has said that an attack against the dollar, or de-dollarization as it's referred to by BRICS member states, is a greater threat to the security of the United States than any invasion of the continental United States ever could be. Goes to show how important he views this, upholding the hegemonic power of the US dollar. Now, it's also worth noting that China has been more and more involved in Venezuelan oil over the past few years. In fact, in August of this year, big Chinese firm began producing oil in Venezuela under a 20-year new pact. Okay, it's over a $1 billion project to produce 60,000 barrels of oil per day of crude oil by the end of 2026, and it would increase as the years go on. As of right now, Venezuela, they produce about 1 billion barrels of oil per day. About 85 to 90% of that is controlled by Chinese firms. That's who it ends up in the hands of. It's traded by petro-yuan settlement, okay? And that could explain why Trump just seized a Chinese tanker that was headed to China from Venezuela. Now, this is very big news. The U.S. has now intercepted 3 tankers that were doing oil trade with Venezuela, the third one being this morning. Brian Berletic posted about this and said, as I've pointed out from the beginning, the U.S. targeting Venezuela is not about retreating to the Western Hemisphere. It is entirely about removing a Russian or Chinese partner from the board, isolating both Russia and China further ahead of continued U.S. aggression worldwide. It also adds to a global maritime blockade that the U.S. is incrementally imposing both through sanctions and direct tanker seizures, as well as, for example, Brian goes on to say, as through targeting and destroying maritime shipping through proxies, for example, using Ukrainian drones, the U.S. CIA provided to Ukraine and directs the use of. So this is really about pressuring Russia and China, targeting them, blockading them, and stripping them of their access to global waters for shipping, for vital resources, for trade of these resources, and for establishing a foothold in global oil reserves and trade in non-dollar denomination. Okay? Now, the amount of oil that the U.S. is seizing in these operations is, it's not small. The first ship that the U.S. seized was worth about $60 million worth of oil. And about 10% of Venezuela's annual GDP comes from oil exports. So this, as you could imagine, will become a very big issue for the Venezuelan state, for the Venezuelan economy in the near future. Even if the U.S. does not invade, even if the U.S. does not move forward with land strikes, this is a very big issue already. All right. The U.S. has seized another ship off of Venezuela earlier this morning, and this time it was allegedly a ship flying under the flag of Guyana. Okay, but a lot of people are saying it was actually a Russian Shadow Fleet vessel. Now, the Chinese are responding to this, and they're not happy about it. As for the Chinese ship that was seized, called Centuries, it was snatched in an operation using military helicopters, which illegally landed because these Chinese vessels are not sanctioned by the U.S. government. So the U.S. government is now seizing illegally non-sanctioned vessels that were headed to Iran, non-sanctioned vessels that were carrying oil headed for China from Venezuela. The U.S. is taking a lot of very drastic measures against China, against Russia, and against Venezuela. Anyone who thinks that the U.S. is, well, we're just focused on, the Western Hemisphere, couldn't be further from the truth, okay? could not be further from the truth. What you all need to understand is the U.S. is now imposing basically a total maritime blockade of Venezuela. And I say nearly total because they are still allowing other exports to go in and out of Venezuela. But as far as oil, it is a total blockade because it's not just the 6 sanctioned Venezuelan ships that the U.S. is stopping and threatening to seize. Most of the Venezuelan tankers or shadow fleet tankers that were docked on the coast of Venezuela have either turned around or have not moved an inch because they understand they are very likely to be seized by the U.S. Coast Guard. This is a very, very big issue, and it's the first time that the U.S. has imposed a blockade of this kind since 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's the type of threat that the U.S. assesses by Russia and China having good relations with Venezuela and Venezuela doing all of this oil trades and petro-yuan settlements, non-dollar settlements, okay? They view it as a threat similar to the Soviet Union putting missiles in Cuba. That is how serious they are taking this threat. And this is where the maritime aspect of the story ends that I'm covering regarding Venezuela, because it is looking like we are headed now towards something that goes beyond maritime and toward land strikes. What could they hope to target? Well, they're going to tell you they're going to target, these Venezuelan drug manufacturing facilities, but I would not be surprised if they will be targeting oil facilities and probably also Miraflores Palace, the head of state, government offices, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Center for Economic Investment, all these places in Venezuela, right? Why do I say that? Well, for starters, we can look at this. The Department of Defense has now issued a solicitation on December 9th for an estimated $32 million one-year contract for food for U.S. military personnel in and visiting Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, as we know, is one of the HQs for the U.S. military, for the Marine Corps, that they're using to stage operations against Venezuela. What does that mean? Well, it means that this contract for food for all of the 18,000 troops that are stationed in this region will extend into 2027 for who knows what purpose and could be renewed after that. So you're talking about long-term food contracts that are being offered now for no small, dollar amount for 18,000 troops in the Caribbean. That will extend 2027, 2028. It means this is going to be a long operation, whatever they do. But not just that. We also have this, okay? The U.S. military has now deployed EA-18Gs. These are very specific types of fighter jets, or of jets, of U.S. military jets, Air Force jets, not fighter jets per se. Their deployment is indicative of what one would see in the lead up to kinetic operations centered heavily on strikes, on targets in inland areas, such as ones the United States might carry out in Venezuela in the future. These are Growler jets. They could provide electronic warfare support for platforms launching standoff attacks or penetrating through enemy air defenses to get closer to their objectives. The jets could also help ensure the survivability of standoff munitions themselves. So these are electronic warfare jamming systems that they will utilize for land-based attacks. And to top it off, we also have this. Reuters published photos showing HC-130J Combat King II combat search and rescue helicopter planes and helicopters on the ramp at Roosevelt Roads at the former U.S. Navy facility in Puerto Rico. The aircraft are stationed at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia, usually, though the helicopters reportedly arrived from deployment to Kadena Air Base in Japan. So now they have these in Puerto Rico. These are search and rescue helicopters and jets, which are used if a fighter jet were to be shot down or a pilot were to eject from their plane in hostile territory. You get what they're planning to do here, right? Search and rescue for fighter jet pilots that go down in action, long-term food contracts, electronic warfare, jamming planes, these growler jets that they're going to deploy for land strikes. It's really not looking good. I think the writing is on the wall. And this, again, is just another war for the Epstein Wall Street regime. Before you leave, I want to say thank you for the support, because after 2 years of being banned, we are finally back home on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and also join as a member on our channel using the link at the top of the description. I rely on the generous support of viewers like yourself to get the truth out to as many people as possible. You can also support the show on Locals or Give Sin Go. The mainstream media and the powers that be are never going to stop attacking us for bringing the truth to as many people as we do. Thank you so much for your support.